Salvation through judgment. This is very important. First of all, what is judgment? Someone take a stab. What is judgment? In the context of the Old Testament. I want to be very concrete. What is the judgment according to the story of Genesis?
The sinner died.
Die! Right, death. That is the judgment. That is the judgment. Yes, all these things are true, right? The story casts this judgment as being punitive. Right? So the idea is that we as humankind, right, like we have disobeyed God. We have rebelled in some way against the nature and authority or personhood of God, who God is. We have rebelled against that in some way, and the story presents death as the judgment for that action. Okay, the answer to that, God's answer to this is salvation, which we'll talk about in just a minute. The Old Testament knows nothing about the great white throne judgment. The Old Testament knows, you're a sinner, you die. That's what the Old Testament knows. But the Old Testament does know about salvation through judgment. Right? And the paradigm is the flood. That's the story. That's the right. God did not lift up Noah and his family up into space, kill everyone, and then somehow transplant them back. Right? Noah, everyone who was saved had to go through the judgment. They went through the flood. But they were saved. And they continued to live on the other side. Does that make sense? So through, this is a spatial word, right? So here is judgment. I'm on this side of the judgment. God makes salvation not by going over or around or under, but through the judgment. And if I make it on the other side, I'm saved. Right? If I'm not saved, I get here and now I die. Does that make sense? The flood story is the paradigm. Noah and his family made it. God found a way for them to make it through the judgment. They didn't escape. They did not escape the judgment. They were saved through the judgment. Do you see the difference? And then salvation is put in terms of life. Right? Via God's covenant. So, in the Old Testament, salvation means you live when you should have died. Noah and his family should have died in the flood, but they were saved because of God's covenant, and so they lived. Salvation comes through judgment, through the judgment, not over, around, right? It's not escaping. Salvation is not escaping. It's living through the death. And of course, salvation comes via God's covenant. This is so important because this is what's going to keep happening over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. People who should have died, but somehow are saved by God. And it's all getting ready, right? It's getting ready. This is, of course, what we believe Jesus will do, right? We confess as Christians, Jesus will come back and will judge all of us. But Jesus says, if you believe in me, I will save you through that judgment. The Red Sea crossing is the difference between death and life in that story. Remember I wrote this up the other day, right? Salvation is life on the one side, judgment is death on the other. And then you have this preposition that shows the relationship between those two concepts. It's at the end of Exodus 14, in the final paragraph, where you get this very high language, right? Like, that day the Lord saved Israel, right? Yasha, like the fundamental Hebrew verb of salvation, is given in that verse. And it says that on that day is when the Israelites believed Yahweh. So it's like, it is the very exact Old Testament terminology about the relationship with Yahweh that is given in the New Testament, right? What Jesus talks about, right? You have to believe, if you want me to save you, Yeshua, right? And remember, Jesus' name is the same as, it's from the same verb, right? It's the Greek form of Joshua, which is south, means he saves, right? If you want me to save you, you have to believe me. Right? From an Old Testament perspective, what's the difference between salvation and judgment?
Death and life.
Death and life. It's not just, right, it's not just a pleasant life versus an unpleasant life. Or a good day versus a bad day. Or even, I'll let you live in Jerusalem versus being on the other side of the river. Right? When you're talking about, in the Old Testament, when you're talking about salvation, this is the matter of life and death. Do you live or do you die? By the way, if you read the book of John, Jesus says the same thing, right? Like, there's this, I can't remember exactly the reference now. It says, right, it says, those who my Father comes, like, if you believe in me, they've crossed over. He uses, right, it's like the cross, right? Crossing the Jordan, crossing the Red Sea. You've crossed over from death to life.